Hello and welcome to my page, Myadreamwalker. This video is about DNA and how DNA is at the root and the heart of everything that is happening right now with awakening, with people's shadow coming to the surface, how it has been used to keep us in separation. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, several months, and been wanting to put some videos together about the DNA and my working knowledge and understanding of it, as well as other lifetime memories I have of being involved with the DNA at a more galactic level. Something that I find is very important to understand is that how could I say this? The control structures that work to separate, to profit from disease, from pollution, from everything that keeps humanity from vibing up to its highest level, at the very core of it, it is all about your DNA. And why is the DNA so important? The DNA is so important because that is where it all started, and that is what we are cycling back to. That is what, if you hear the ascension process, that is what the ascension process is about. That is even what the awakening is about. That is what the movements that keep us in separation are about, okay? That is what things that are released of a biological matter are about. In ancient times and all over the world, tribes, the Aboriginal people in Africa, in ancient cave structures, hieroglyphs, different cultures and civilizations, you can find writings about and pictures of the DNA. And why is the DNA so important? If you've been on more of a starseed journey and an awakening journey, then you have pretty much some level of, you've heard a galactic historian talk perhaps, or you've heard different teachers who speak about and teach about the DNA. And if you're familiar with the stories of Atlantis and Lemuria and the fall, and how our DNA was changed, how codes were turned off in the DNA. DNA is the building block of the universe. DNA is what brings the etheric into the physical, okay? So those strands, which many of you watching this may know, and for those that don't, welcome, because this is, and these videos that I'm making are going to marry the spiritual and the science, which is all, it's all in the same pot together. It makes it all come cohesive and make sense, and why the DNA is the very foundation of it all. So, when you go out into the universe and create from source, right? From first spark of source, and create the beings that were the first creator beings, the architects, if you'd like to call them that. DNA is how they bring, right, the energy and everything in to manifest in the physical. That is your physical body. It's even been shown in our first strand of DNA. That is how we manifest our physical body. It is your first strand, the double helix. That's how you manifest your physical body. DNA is literally the building blocks of the universe. And so what's happened with humanity is that we've had a disconnect from understanding our DNA, first of all, because if you think about, like, when you go back to school and you think about science and what's taught, right? Let's be clear that what's taught in the education system is very much a control structure and a specific narrative that keeps you believing and thinking in a way that keeps you moving into, well, I have to work up and get a job and join the rat race and stay at the bottom of the pyramid, which I've spoken about in my other videos, right? And so, if you think back in your books in school, what was, like a page, a chapter, a section of a chapter on DNA, unless it was something you moved into college and at a higher level, medically, you studied for some reason, mostly DNA was not something that you were taught about, right? You don't even, it's like, whatever, DNA, right? Well, DNA is the foundation of everything that is going on. Everything. Okay? So, in talking about DNA, okay, we have to talk about epigenetics because it's so important. Because those that control the world at every level, the human level and the riders of the humans, I like to call them, right? The upper levels, even the galactics and the interference from other races that have not had our best intentions at heart. Okay, those of you who know the stories, and I will get into them in another video about how we are genetically engineered. This is a biological vehicle that you put your consciousness in, right? It's made to match with the planet and the structure and the elements that are here and the minerals and everything that's made to create this body and this vehicle for your consciousness to function in this reality, this gravitational field, all of it, okay? And the way your DNA is utilized, manipulated, created, what you express in the physical. And the beings that have tampered with our DNA. And part of this awakening and ascension process is you go from cruising along asleep, right? Subconsciously riding the DNA, subconsciously expressing through your DNA, and you start to wake up and you consciously begin to express through your DNA. So epigenetics, which is so important to understand, and I'm going to read you something here that was taken from the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences on nih.gov, because it just gives you a foundation that this is actual stuff that's known. It's the science of genetics. It is not just, me, a starseed, a person standing here, sitting here telling you stuff and my theories out in woo-woo land. This is the marriage of, the etheric, the spiritual, and the science, okay? So epigenetics, they say, is processes that direct when individual genes are turned on and off, all right? Now think about that. The processes that direct when individual genes are turned on and off, okay? So what processes are we talking about? Diet, stress, pollutants, okay? So if you can turn genes on and off and direct that process, and awakening and ascension and getting back our sovereignty and unifying, right, is all about DNA and using epigenetics to either turn on our dormant DNA, pull our ancestral codes and heal them and clear them, or use the environment and external factors and epigenetics to harm, to dumb down, to mute and mutate the DNA into a way that serves best those that do not have our best interests at heart, okay? It goes on to say, epigenetic processes are particularly important in early life when cells are first receiving the instructions that will dictate their future development and specialization. These processes can also be initiated or disrupted by environmental factors such as diet, stress, aging, pollutants. Okay? So they know that when you are in the early stages of your life, okay, that you are receiving the instructions that are going to dictate what you're going to express that is stored in your genes, in your DNA. Okay? So what do? They put you in school and they keep teaching you the same dogmatic stuff, let's be clear. And all the institutions and the way they've taken us as children and developed, let's teach the history of wars. Let's keep reminding you of war. I mean, how many times, I have to tell you, by the time I was in like 10th grade in high school, I was so over the same dang history lessons and the same wars about, the wars, all the things that they push, right? And they are using that to pull those programs and those memories and those things that are encoded in the DNA, in the genes. And it's put there, right? And that doesn't even come to mention what is put in the air, okay? What is sprayed intentionally into the air, comes out in a big white stripe, okay? I'm trying to not get censored, so we know what that is, right? And the different things that they do and they give you and they put in the diet and the different chemicals and the things that are there, these things start and they begin to epigenetically control, override, and choose what gene expressions are getting expressed. Then we also have the layer of the beliefs in what you're told and taught. So this is one of my, it drives me batty. And I wish people would understand it. If you take nothing else away from this video, this is it, okay? Your beliefs are your life. Your beliefs are your life. And here is what I mean by that. I'm going to give you an example, okay? So I was in a store, a home goods, like a home store, home decorating store with my partner several months back. And I heard a couple of females talking in the other aisle. And I'm listening, and the one is saying how she already knows that she's going to get a certain form of cancer because her mother had it and her grandmother had it. And so that's just the way it is. And she's preparing for it now. And it was so sad to me because all I could hear was, you're literally programming your DNA. DNA responds to what you tell it. It's been proven. It responds. And so you are literally you are using epigenetics without knowing it because you've been led by this belief, and the medical field and the industry and the ones that keep it for profit, they know and understand, okay, that when we teach this through the DNA, that they're actually pulling that and you are taking that along instead of healing it. Instead of teaching people to say, well, my mother had this and my grandmother had this, but it stops with me. And I'm not going to accept the epigenetic, code to say I'm going to get that. And the talk that, well, it's in your genes, it's in your DNA, you can do nothing about it, because that's BS. Okay? That's BS. But they want you to keep doing that. They want to keep that going along. You can override that and overwrite it. You do not need to be the next expression of it. And those of you that are awakening and going through your healing ascension process, this stuff comes to the surface to be healed and cleared. If you're a starseed and you're aware of it, this has come up probably in your life in some way, something that has come through you to be healed and cleared. You incarnated in to clear these codes out of the DNA and epigenetically overwrite them so they are not running the program in your genetic line anymore. But you're taught that, oh, well, if you had this and so had it, and it's in your genes, they know that epigenetically they are getting you to program your own genes to pull that expression. And I wish that people would stop and understand that, because you control your body, okay? Remember, from the etheric, the energy, into the physical. And that first strand of DNA is how you manifest in the physical. And you can overwrite and override that. And diet. exercise, the level of stress, learning to meditate, which brings me to sound, okay? And sound is so important to changing our DNA. Many people go to like a yoga studio and you go to a meditation class and you have sound bowls, right? And you hear the sound bowls and they like vibrate through you and resonate through you. And you're like, oh, that's cool. I can kind of feel it. And at a very, kind of like base level, it feels like it's like vibrating, the cells and vibrating stuff through you. And it is. It's loosening stuff up. It's putting a different frequency and tone into the body. And because we are all unique expressions through our DNA, what works for one person may not work for another in the same way, because we all are expressing differently, okay? And many people hear light language and they don't understand what light language is. And light language is sound and vibration used to move energy. And when you start having your light language come in and your light language come on, express it. It's the same as toning. If you just feel like, and you're off key or whatever it is, and you want to just belt it out and tone to yourself out in the forest, in the trees, or you want to speak light language that's coming into you, those are things that your higher self is sending in. Those are codes and things that are stored within you that are going to overwrite and override and activate things and change things in the DNA. It is epigenetic, okay? So on that note, there was a study done, and this article was fabulous. It was on Shepherd's Heart, and it's called Music Can Change Your DNA. And I found this an excellent tie-in for today to just speak about how sound affects the DNA, solfeggio frequencies, light language, toning, sound bowls, things that are of a high vibrational sound, and how they affect our DNA, okay? Because there's some things that you will hear and they will come to you and they make you feel so good, and they pull those high vibration expressions out of you, and it's affecting you at a cellular level, okay? So I'm just going to read you this real quick. It says, sound and vibrations can activate or turn off your DNA, okay? In 1998, Dr. Glenn Ryan of the Quantum Biology Research Lab in New York performed experiments with in vitro DNA. 4 styles of music, including Sanskrit and Gregorian chants that utilize the 528 Hertz frequency, were converted to scalar audio waves and played via a CD player to test tubes containing in vitro DNA. The effects of the music were determined by measuring the DNA test tube samples, absorption of UV light after an hour of exposure to the music, okay? And we all know that bringing in light, vibrating the light through our cells, bringing in that higher expression of ourselves, right? It's part of what awakening and ascension is all about. So the results from the one experiment indicated that classical music caused a 1.1% increase in absorption. Rock music caused a 1.8% decrease, indicating no effect, okay? Gregorian chants, however, caused a 5% and 9.1% increase in absorption in 2 separate experiments. Sanskrit chanting caused a similar 8.2 and 5.8% effect in 2 separate experiments. Glenn Ryan's experiment indicates that music can resonate with human DNA. Rock and classical music do not affect DNA, although spiritual musical chants do resonate with DNA. Although these experiments were performed with isolated and purified DNA, it is likely that the frequencies associated with these forms of music will also resonate with DNA in the body. Genes can be switched on or off due to sound simulations. It is within reason to think that DNA can be affected by sound, and if by sound, then also by the frequency of that sound. Okay? So the 528 is considered the miracle tone. If any of you, most of you, have heard of some type of solfeggio tones or something, or the different hertz, if you're into meditation and those kind of things. 528 is known as the miracle tone, okay? And what it says here is that math scientist Victor Showell describes 528 as fundamental to the ancient pi and the golden mean evident throughout natural design. Vic Showell and John Stuart Reed, a pioneer in acoustic research and cymatic measurements, have proven that 528 is essential to the sacred geometry of circles and spirals, consistent with DNA structuring and hydrosonic restructuring. 528 resolves to a 6, the icon for physical manifestation. That is 5 plus 2 plus 8 equals 15, and 1 plus 5 equals 6 using Pythagorean math. The symbol 6 reflects the spiraling down from heaven into the wholeness of earth. Could this be Jacob's ladder in the Bible? Okay, so 528 is the tone associated with DNA repair, is the bioenergy of health and longevity. It is the harmonic vibration that lifts your heart and divine voice in harmony with heaven. So how important is sound, and how is sound used? And think about the different types of sound, mainstream-esque, that are promoted on this planet, and how they're really affecting, right, the DNA, the frequency of the DNA. So if you have that light language coming in, use it. Say it to yourself. When my light language first started coming online and I would use it during meditation, I could feel this like shift. It was like an amazing feeling that went through every cell of my body, and I knew I was affecting and changing my DNA. Toning. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Let the tones come through you. It will start to vibrate your DNA in resonance and in alignment, instead of letting external epigenetic factors influence your DNA, right? Sound bowls, solfeggio frequencies. These are all things that are so important to us recalibrating and taking control of our DNA. Everything that is happening right now in the world, and I mean everything, at the very base level, comes down to DNA. Who controls the expression of your DNA? Do you control the expression of your DNA? Because once you are awake to this fact, why would you let anybody else epigenetically influence your DNA? Why would you let external factors that you don't have to participate in control the expression of your DNA? Those that want to pull from your DNA the expressions that keep you cycling in disease, sickness, even poverty, whatever it is, all right, in separation, in anger, everything that is carried and stored in your DNA that they can pull on, okay, to bring about the continued separation and to keep you from being a sovereign, united humanity. This is all about DNA. And so in my upcoming videos, I've been spending a lot of time at my desk researching and pulling the science together. My background is in 20 plus years of working with the body. That's always, I understand it. It's like my wheelhouse and my hobby. I'm like a super nerd when it comes to that stuff. And so I've really pulled together a lot of stuff. This is kind of the base fundamental level here that we're talking about. We're going to talk about how the diet affects your DNA, how the pollutants affect the DNA, all these epigenetic things that are affecting your DNA, how certain things that are injected into you go into the cell walls and change and affect the expression of your DNA, and how it's known. This is all about the DNA. Our DNA holds the codes, the ability to realign, to open the fields, to hold the light, to pull in the higher vibration of what is happening on this planet. It is amazing what we carry within us. And that's what they don't want you to figure out. That's what they've been trying to keep from expressing. That's what they are trying to do with everything they are using right now and all they got. It's all about your DNA. But once you are empowered and you understand what is happening with your DNA, that's when it makes sense. That's when we become unified. That's when we take back our sovereignty. We each express our unique expression of God, that we are here, of creator, of source, that we are here to express. And we become this beautiful, unified field of higher consciousness that's healed and cleared and is working on their DNA and bringing in the golden age. I look forward to our next visit. Thank you. Blessings. Namaste.